Hey there, this is Pete from Strymon. I'm here with our new UltraViolet vintage vibe pedal. In designing UltraViolet, our goal was to bring a variety of the very best vibe tones from the 60s on available in one small format pedal. One aspect of the vintage vibe pedals was that it was very hard to find two that sounded alike or one that would sound the same, year after year. So with UltraViolet, we are able to bring the very best of vibe tones in a reliable and consistent manner. With our new one-foot switch small format pedal layout, we felt like this was a great opportunity to use that format to provide a simple yet powerful control set for the vintage vibe tones. We have three knobs on UltraViolet. They are speed, intensity, and volume, which are the traditional controls on a vintage vibe pedal. And we have two switches. Mode is a mix selection, and bias gives three different settings of the LFO sweep for the vibe sound. With the mode and chorus setting, that's the traditional vibe sound that's kind of phasey and chewy, and it's an equal mix of the wet and dry signals. And with bias in the mid position, that's what we would consider to be a traditionally optimal sweep for some of the classic vibe sounds. So let's listen to that. Here's my dry signal. So the speed and intensity and volume are all self-explanatory. In a traditional vibe circuit, there's an LFO that varies the intensity of a light bulb, which in turn affects the resistance of light-dependent resistors, which in turn affect the frequency notches that create the vibe effect. In UltraViolet, we parameterized each of those interactions and were able to dial in the exact response that we wanted for each of the bias and speed and intensity settings. A couple of the important parts of the sweep are the start and end points. When you listen to a vibe pedal, it kind of seems to have a high and a low plateau that is switching between. And that's part of it, but it's also the shape and speed which it transitions between those two, end points that create a lot of the movement and magic of vibe tones. So let's listen as we change the intensity and see how that impacts at a constant speed here again at the mid bias in the chorus setting. With the intensity at 0, the LFO has an amplitude of 0, which means there's no oscillation. So you just hear the circuit with the bulb in its resting bias point. It creates essentially a phase EQ. At maximum intensity, the range is high enough that as the bands go back and forth, it creates almost kind of a doubling effect, which becomes more dramatic as we increase the speed. At slow speeds, we were able to increase the range of intensity over most traditional vibe effects to add versatility to some slow sweeps. So let's listen to that. At minimum speed and maximum intensity. At higher speeds and lower intensities, there's very nice tremolo type effects to be had. The volume control can give you a 4 dB boost or cut, which can be really nice when you're playing in front of an amp that's a little bit broken up. Then by stepping on UltraViolet in front of the amp with a boost on it will push the amp a little bit harder and kind of really, allow your signal to kind of pop. So let's do that. Here's my dry signal. Let's listen to the different bias settings now. Here's mid, which we've been listening to. Now low bias centers the sweep around the lower frequencies, so it creates a pulsing kind of vibe effect. And the transitions from the top of the sweep to the bottom of the sweep are a little more rapid and allows for a little more of a kind of square wavy pulse vibe effect. Back to mid. And at high bias, it starts at higher frequencies, so the sweep covers a wider range of frequencies. So let's go back to low. Again, we can get nice, kind of almost squarish tremolo here. Now let's go up to the high bias. At the high bias with high speeds, the sweep is covering such a range fast enough that it can get very wild sounding. You chill out the intensity. So with low intensity, let's sweep the bias now so you can really hear the difference. In fact, let's start with intensity at 0 and we'll hear the effect of changing the bias. So one thing to note is at high bias, the fixed EQ that's being formed from the phase circuit sounds darker than it does at low. Because at low bias, the frequencies from the vibe circuitry create a notch with the dry signal. So when it's at low bias, those notches are happening at low frequencies, canceling low frequencies and allowing high frequencies to pass. But at high bias, the notches are canceling the higher frequencies, so you get a darker signal. And this is where, at these low intensities, the difference between the three bias settings is pretty dramatic. So now let's check out the blend mode of UltraViolet. Now, in a traditional vibe pedal, you have switches two positions. It's chorus or vibrato. Vibrato is just the wet signal. So this blend is an option that is not available on the traditional vibe circuits. And what it does is it blends more of the dry than the wet. So it creates a more mellow vibe effect. Let's check that out. Let's go to a higher intensity here. Compare it to chorus setting. And this can be nice when you want, some modulation that's a little more subtle. Like let's go to the slow speed, high intensity sweep and check this out in the blend setting at the high bias. So the blend setting is blending in 70% dry and 30% wet to give that milder setting. Now let's check out some of the tremolo sounds that we were listening to. Let's go to low bias and a faster speed and low intensity. Compared to chorus. So it just gives you another set of options to dial in various colors and tones. With the mode switch in vibrato, it's just the wet signal, and this gives a phase vibrato, which can add some subtle motion or some not so subtle motion, and the three different bias settings will affect the shape of that vibrato waveform. So let's just play a static note and switch between the bias settings here. So at the low setting, the transition is a little more abrupt, but a little more stable sounding in terms of the pitch. There's a faster, more abrupt disturbance to the pitch. So compared to mid and then high, which gets the most pitchy kind of a response. The vibrato can be nice also, again, with the volume boost to add just a little bit of motion, and extra kick to a lead line. since it's only the wet signal that we're hearing, there's no tone changes like there are in the chorus and the blend setting. It's just the nature of the movement of the pitch. So you can play around with the speed and intensity to get various kind of vibrato settings. As part of our 1FS family, UltraViolet has all the features you'd expect, including our discrete JFET front end, TRS stereo in and TRS stereo out, so you can put the pedal anywhere in your rig and not have to worry about impacting your stereo image, expression pedal modes, USB-C, full MIDI implementation, 300 presets. So if you're running a MIDI rig, the amount of control and number of parameters and number of sounds you're going to be able to get is pretty wide ranging and represents what we feel are the best of vibe tones.